Chris here, certified RV technician for Unique Camping and Marine. You're probably here to learn more about RV sensors, or you're actually dealing with a misreading sensor yourself. Don't worry. When it comes to RV sensors, we're going to cover basically everything you need to know about them. And fortunately, we've been helping thousands of RVers get their sensors working again, even when they thought they needed to just give up on them. During this video, we're going to show you all of the basics about what RV sensors are, how they work, and we're going to be using lots of visuals to show you exactly how it all goes down. Before we get started, I wanted to point out a resource which we have for you called thelineofduty.com. I'm there every day engaging with customers and campers. So if you have any questions or would like to speak with me directly, join me at thelineofduty.com. And with that, let's get started. So before we get into taking care of your sensors in the black and gray water holding tanks, let me be the first to tell you here that we've had hundreds of comments of people who have tried these methods, which unfortunately just did not work. And so because of this, I'll list them off and we'll briefly touch on them, but it's really not worth your time to waste on these. The methods which are often spread around the internet are the geo method, putting usually about a 10-pound ice bag into your blackwater holding tank and potentially driving around with it. Onboard tank rinsers, which come oftentimes on newer RVs nowadays. The exterior style where you plug it onto your discharge valve and hook a garden hose up to it to rinse the entire tank out. And then also the toilet down spray ones. And unfortunately, when it comes to all of these, the results are lacking, to put it mildly. We've tested all of these ourselves and have had poor results. So let's dive into actually taking care of your RV holding tank and getting your sensors back up and running again. Sensors in an RV are used to show the level of water and waste inside either a black water holding tank or a gray water holding tank. They are usually just wired together and run to a control panel on the inside. There's a couple of different versions of this, but essentially their main purpose is to show you what the level of either waste or water or combination therein is inside your holding tank. There are essentially 3 and sometimes 4 types of tanks which have sensors. There's the freshwater holding tank, which has a sensor array inside of it to show you how much water remains inside the freshwater holding tank. There's the gray water holding tank, which will show you how much water has been drained from your sinks, showers, and other appliances around the RV into the gray water holding tank. There's the sometimes galley holding tank, which will basically just be from your kitchen sink into the gray water holding, into its own version of a gray water holding tank. All of these have sensors. And then finally, there is the black water holding tank. With the black water holding tank, it will be for holding waste and toilet paper and the water from the toilet. So here we have a dissected black or gray water holding tank. They're usually sold pretty much interchangeably. This one's more set up for black water holding tank. And to kind of walk you through what we've done with it is we have a hole drilled in the back here, which is going to be the vent for the holding tank. Over here is the 3-inch hole where the PVC from the toilet is going to enter into the holding tank. We've got it cut open here in half so we can show you basically the length of the tank on what it looks like on the inside to remove any mystery there. On the front end here, we have where the PVC would come out and attach to the black water or gray water waste valve assembly. And then along here is our sensor array. And on the sensor array, we have the 1/3 full, the 2/3 full, and the full sensors. And over on this side is a ground, so all of these readings can be sent back to the control panel inside the RV. For the technical version, you're going to have a ground wire here, which is connected to the chassis of the RV. And this is basically a base point for the signal to find a return path back to the ground. Over here we have the 1/3 full, the 2/3 full, and the full sensors. And as water level hits each of these sensors, it will close the circuit. And when you go inside the RV in order to check on the panel how full the tank is, if you are 1/3 full, what will happen is the water will close the circuit between this sensor and this sensor and send a complete path back up to the um, control panel. And for the layman, this is 1/3 full, this is 2/3 full, and this is full. And that's essentially all you need to know. Well, you will first discover a misreading sensor when you have dumped the contents of the black water holding tank at a dump station or at your campsite, and you know for sure that it's all been drained out of there. And then when you go back inside to check the sensors, it still shows 2/3 full or 1/3 full when you're expecting to see essentially empty. So, what's most likely happening here is that there's probably a bit of waste or debris built up on the sensor head itself. And if you look inside of here, you will see that we have a wad of toilet paper which is up against one of the sensors. Now, even if this was completely empty, you would definitely get a reading of 2/3 full, and it's because we've got this wad built up inside there. And that will lead to showing a misreading sensor. Well, in a gray water holding tank, this can actually occur much more quickly and more frequently than you would actually have on a black water holding tank. With black water, you essentially need to have either a piece of waste or toilet paper that is stuck to and hanging off of the sensor, which can take some time to get there. When it comes to a gray water holding tank, if you have enough grease and soap debris that is floating around inside the tank, it can very easily adhere to the sensor head with just the normal use of the water system on your RV. So if you can imagine, instead of this being toilet paper in here, it would be some amount of food debris, maybe a small piece of lettuce or some grease, which is built up and is resting against that sensor. And it's going to show that it's full, even if there's nothing else inside the tank. And that's how you would discover that you have a misreading gray tank sensor. Well, fortunately, it's relatively straightforward. Since we've got this debris which is built up inside there, and we won't be able to see this, of course. This is just kind of an example, so we've got a good visual for it. But what we'll want to do is we'll want to fill up the holding tank with as much water as we can fit inside of there. You'll definitely want to monitor from the toilet side to see what your water levels are at so you don't overflow the toilet. But you'll want to get as much water in there because if you don't have all of the water covering each of the different sensor heads, and again, since you can't see it, you'll need to cover all of them. What you'll want to do from there is then put in a high quality cleaning solution, which will then break down the toilet paper or grease or whatever it is and get it off of the sensor head itself. And then once you go to dump the holding tank, all of this gets discharged out of there and your sensors will work again. Well, there's really three major types which are installed into black water and gray water and freshwater RV holding tanks. And there's a button style, which is basically a small piece of metal held in place with a grommet. And that's relatively flush, but not exactly flush with the sidewall of the black water, gray water, or freshwater holding tank. And as the water goes across that, it will close the circuit for it. There's a brand called Horst, and they do a Miracle, which is a rod style holding tank. sensor, and these are basically a small metal stick which sticks into it. Sometimes they have a cover over the top of it, and oftentimes they're just left open. The final of the top three RV sensors, which is the least common of them, is the sea level holding tank sensor. When it comes to the sea level holding tank sensor, it's sending a signal through the plastic wall of the RV holding tank and is picking up what is on the other side of it to read back to the computer monitor to tell exactly what the level of the RV holding tank is at that time. However, if grease, waste, or debris is stuck to the wall where the sensor is located at, it can still lead to a misreading sensor. Now, on the first two of these, they can get blocked off by having debris which is caught on them or dangling off of it. Or in the gray water tank situation, you might have grease or some small amount of food debris which is adhered to it and is closing the circuit, and therefore showing that there is something inside the tank when you know that there is not. If there's one takeaway which we can offer for this, it's that we need to get whatever is on the sensor head off of there. That's always what's causing the problem inside the holding tanks, whether black, gray, and sometimes even fresh, but pretty unlikely. And we want you to know that like it can be fixed, and the best way to do that is to remove whatever is on those sensor heads and get it off of there. So we've gone through the steps as far as what sensors are, how they work, and what can be causing sensor problems. Next, we're going to step you through all of the different things which you will need to do in order to get the physical waste or buildup or grease off of the sensor heads themselves, and we'll walk you through each of those steps. A lot of the remedies which are being talked about online really don't do much to clean off sensor heads, especially in the blackwater holding tank. But we can get to the remedy which actually will work when it comes to sensor probe heads in the blackwater holding tank. Starting at the sensors, let's see exactly where it's reading in order to see how full that it actually is, and then we will go out and dump the holding tank to then confirm if we have a misreading sensor. So the next thing which we're going to do is going to be to dump the blackwater holding tank. We're not going to actually do that right now because we actually have a fair amount in there which we are not quite prepared to dump yet because we're doing some testing with it. But you would want to make sure that everything drains out of here, and then we'll head back inside to check our sensors. So back over here at the control panel, we're going to test and see, and we know that we dumped it for sure, so it's empty, but it's still showing 2/3 full. So now let's go through the steps of cleaning off the sensor probe heads in order to get rid of this issue, and then you can get back to making memories. Okay, now let's fill up our black tank, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the easiest way to fill up the blackwater holding tank is going to just be to hold down the pedal. And since you've got a misreading sensor, you're going to need to hold this down for quite a while, usually about 10 minutes or so. Well, usually you'll start to see the water level raising up to where you can see it coming up to the toilet itself. And once you're up at that level, you know for sure that you're full of water. From there, what you're going to want to do is add a full treatment of a high-quality bacteria and enzyme-based sensor cleaner. We recommend Unique's Restore It. What that will do is it will begin to work its magic and break down any waste which has built up and is sticking or adhering to the sensor heads. Redump the blackwater or gray water holding tank, and then go back inside of the RV and check your sensor heads. And sure enough, we have completely cleared up the problems. Sometimes it might take 2, maybe 3 tries of doing this in order to fully clean off the sensor heads. But once you're done with the amount of time which is required for it, you should be good to go and have perfectly working sensors again. When it comes to cleaning the sensors in the gray water holding tank, it's a little bit different from the black water holding tank. What you're going to want to do is, again, fill up the gray water holding tank as much as you can. Now, in order to do this, we recommend just running the sink for roughly 5 to 7 minutes. It all depends on the size of your gray water holding tank. That varies greatly depending on the kind of RV which you have. As you are filling up the gray water holding tank, we recommend pouring in roughly the better part of a full bottle, 20 ounces or more of Dawn Ultra dishwashing liquid, and keep the water running because you want to wash it past the P-traps and various piping to get it actually into the gray water holding tank. When it comes time to add the Dawn to the gray water holding tank, we highly recommend doing this in the evening so you can let it sit overnight. Time on this one is not as important as frequent cleanings of the gray water holding tank and the sensors itself. So it is more important to just make sure that you do it on an overnight schedule and then dump in the morning, then test your sensors. It may take 2 to 3 cleanings in order to get the results which you were looking for. And of course, the results being working sensors again. The product which will actually clean off the sensors in the black water holding tank is going to be Unique Camping and Marine's Restore It. When it comes to using Restore It, we recommend pouring in half of the bottle and letting it sit for at least 12 to 72 hours. Time is the real magic on this one, and you're going to want to let it to sit for as long as you can possibly allow it to sit. Usually after that 72 hours, your sensors are restored and you are back in business as far as having working sensors go. However, if that doesn't work, repeat the process and then add the second half of the Restore It to the black water holding tank and allow it to sit for more like the 72-hour mark. That will then fully clear off anything which is left inside there. And once you dump the holding tank, check your sensors again and they should be working just like new. So something which we get asked all of the time is there too long of amount of time to leave Restore inside the black water holding tank? And the answer to that is absolutely not. You can let it sit inside of there for days, weeks, even months, but we understand that you want to get back to camping. So once you're done with the designated amount of time, you should be good to go, but there really is no too long amount of time to leave it inside the holding tank. For you full-timers out there who are saying to yourself, well, I live in my RV and I can't take that 72 hours to treat the sensors, the couple of things which we would recommend would be ideally take a 3-day vacation and let it do its thing. If that doesn't work for you, a lot of the times campground facilities often have facilities on site which you can use during the interim while you're waiting for the Restore It to work. If you still must use the RV toilet, fill it up as much as you're comfortable doing and then continue using the toilet with the Restore It inside of the holding tank. But as you get closer to the time where it's time to dump the holding tank, try to get it as close to the top as possible. Again, Restore It can't work unless it is covering up each of the different sensor heads inside there. And then give it at least a day or so before you dump the holding tank to make sure that it's actually covering all of the surfaces and is able to break down anything which might be on the sensors themselves. So we've gone through the steps of showing you what sensors are and what they look like in a holding tank and how they might get fouled up. We've also walked through the steps on how to clean them. And now let's talk about prevention. So it is recommend that you follow the Unique method, and we'll put a link in the description below. And what that essentially states is that it's 50% product and 50% process. And the magic behind that is if you're using a holding tank treatment that is high quality and actually breaks down waste in paper, you really shouldn't have to deal with sensor issues moving forward. We clearly recommend using something like Unique Camping and Marine's RV Digest It Plus. That's by far the most powerful holding tank treatment on the market, and it does the absolute best job as far as waste breakdown. Even though many others claim to break down waste, unfortunately, the reality is that they don't actually break down waste. And we'll link another video in the description below which shows this process happening or not happening, more likely. From that standpoint, you should really not have very many sensor issues in the future. But if you do, there's really no worries because Restore It is there to help as well. If you've gone through the steps of trying to clear these sensor issues and you're still experiencing problems, the first thing I would recommend doing would be to call our customer support, and they can help walk you through some additional steps which might help take care of things. But occasionally, and it is pretty rare, you might run into an actual broken sensor or the wiring which leads to the sensor itself, in which case you might actually just need to replace the sensors or take a look at the wiring and make sure you don't have any corrosion on the back end of the sensors themselves, because that can also lead to misreading sensors. But again, all of that is extremely rare. That about wraps it up. I'm Chris, certified RV technician with Unique Camping and Marine. We hope that you found this video to be educational and hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and we will see you on the next one.